I need some tips. Like, am I doing all right?
Yeah, first of all, I would not have guessed that, this is sort of a tangent career move.
See? I told all of you I'm doing
I'm
fine.
not just saying that. I was like, might have a little future here. What can I say?
Welcome to Hana Kuma's Good Trouble, where we celebrate those who have the courage to disrupt the norm. I'm Nick Kyrgios, professional tennis player and your host. In each episode, we'll sit down with game changers who aren't afraid to rock the boat. We'll dig into their stories and the waves they've made in their worlds for the better. Welcome to Good Trouble with Nick Kyrgios. We are all familiar with the saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. In the case of today's guest, Jemele Hill, the phrase has literally come to life. Armed with an arsenal of words, she has navigated the world of journalism from general assignment reporter to live in our homes on the world's biggest sports network, ESPN SportsCenter, on her way to becoming one of the best cultural commentators. Her text slaps so hard, she's not only written for The Atlantic, crafted Emmy Award-winning material, it's earned her the 2018 National Association of Black Journalists of the Year Award. She's even caught the attention of the President of the United States. To call her Unbothered, the name of her podcast, is putting it lightly, and it's in the same spirit she's been able to continue her climb uphill, the title of her recently published memoirs. Thank you for joining us. What does Good Trouble mean to you?
Shout out to the clever intro, by the way.
It was one of the better ones.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the play on words, I got it. As a wordsmith, I sort of appreciate that. For me, Good Trouble is disruption. And a lot of people, when they think about journalism, I don't think they necessarily think about it in disruptive terms. Of course, they think about us interviewing people, asking questions, being at press conferences, those kind of things.
Yep.
But the entire point of journalism is a phrase that they used to say a lot when I was in journalism school at Michigan State, which is your job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, right? And so our entire presence is supposed to disrupt the chain of power. We're here to hold the people in power who make the decisions accountable. So for me, that is Good Trouble.
I guess I've had my my war with journalists and the
Yes.
media, and I haven't always seen
And
eye
now
to
look
eye.
at you now.
And look at me now.
Look at you now.
But that's never really. I've always spoke my mind in press conferences, and I guess where does that confidence come from with you? Like, has it always been something you've been brought up with, or is it how did that come about?
I come from a long line of family members who spoke their mind. And I guess some of it was innate, some of it was osmosis, and just with simple things. I mean, my family, we used to debate a lot about everything. And so I learned early on that having an opinion, a strong opinion, and being able to support and back up that opinion was very central to not just communication, but just in terms of changing the world. And so for me, it just came naturally. And it wasn't even something that I was aware was some kind of superpower. To other people, like, well, you just speak your mind. I'm like, I never looked at it that way. I just like, oh, I have something to say, I'm gonna say it. And it just kind of is what it is after that. So I guess it's a combination of innate and osmosis.
Were you ever media trained at any point in your career? Because I got taught media training early in my career, and it obviously didn't work at all because I went into press conferences and I was just, Piers Morgan's catching me for eating sushi in a press conference. Like, I've just had a shocker with it. And I guess, do you ever have that training? Did anyone kind of coach you, or did you just go in there feeling confident?
I never got into this business ever with the idea of being on camera, ever.
Yep.
I came up during a different time, and I wanted to be a print journalist. And during that time, there was a very clear delineation between print journalists and broadcast journalists. We were two gangs. It was like Crips and Bloods. Like,
Yep.
no, we don't want anything to do with that. The real journalists write. They're not on TV. So I had to learn everything on the fly. I had to, being out front and presenting the story, sometimes being the story, was totally new to me. My media training was just in sitting down with athletes like you and understanding why certain athletes were compelling, understanding the things that worked, understanding the things that didn't work. And I think it is in many ways very akin to what you're doing now. It's like being on this side, you know what it's like, right? So you know the questions that you want to ask somebody, you know what you find to be interesting and compelling. And so being on this side, I know from talking to people like you what compels people when you speak about your experiences and being candid and authentic, and how that tends to draw people more so than canned answers
definitely.
and those kinds of things. So.
But I guess what drew you to, journalism and more specifically like sports in general? Like, were you a sports fan growing up?
I was a huge sports fan. I was the neighborhood tomboy for sure. So a lot of my early experience was through playing. I was one of those kids who really immersed themselves. Like I knew baseball was my first love. So I knew every player, all the teams. During that time, you actually had to read the newspaper to follow your favorite team. So
Different time.
Different times. So that actually introduced me to journalism, is having to read the sports pages. Right. And I saw from reading the sports pages that people actually make a living talking and writing about sports. And I was one of those weirdos who knew in high school that I wanted to do this. So I started pursuing a journalism career when I was in 10th grade. I wrote for my high school newspaper. It is ridiculous. It was always writing. That was my love, reading and writing.
My tennis journey is a bit different to yours. I wasn't so set in stone. Like, you obviously fell in love with writing very early on. You knew that was your calling and you were super talented with it. But, I hated tennis. I grew up, I was very fat, overweight as a kid, and my mum saw that and she was like, oh, you need to be a bit active. She kind of dragged me down to the tennis courts and got me into the tennis, and I hate it. I was crying. I remember it. It's traumatizing to this day, to be honest.
Wow.
And I loved basketball. I loved the culture. I used to sit there watching, VCR tapes and CDs of, all these Vince Carter dunks, and I just loved everything about basketball. The camaraderie, the teamwork. But tennis for me was
And you got the height.
I do have the height. And I played it.
height.
I played it when I was young, and it just coming from Australia. I wish I kind of, speaking to you and how passionate you are about writing and following what you love to do is for me, I kind of want to go back and turn the clock back and just be follow that NBA dream. It's so strange, I can see how much happiness it's brought you, but my tennis journey has been.
So if you hated it early on,
Yeah.
what was it that made you go back?
I guess my parents pushed me towards, just that dream of tennis. They loved the sport, and in Australia, tennis is huge. It's one of our biggest sports there, and I know it's not the same, as big as in America, but my family didn't have much growing up, and they kind of saw that I was talented, and they kind of saw that, I guess, as a way out to, having a better life. So it's, we have such different, I wish that I did follow the NBA.
Yeah,
kind of
well,
dream,
but it's one of those things where, there's lessons in that, right? There's lessons in the fact that maybe something that, while you may have displaced a dream, so to speak, you were able to find something else that you were really passionate about. And a lot of people don't have the courage to do that.
True.
People get locked in on things, and when that doesn't work out, it discourages them to the point where they don't want to do anything else. And you, whether pushed or however it worked out, it was sort of clear this was maybe where you were destined to be.
Definitely, I wouldn't be here right now.
Might not be here right now.
The platform I've been given is amazing, and it's been a great journey, that's for sure. And is there anyone over time that's helped you, become who you are? Did you look up to anyone? Any other writers?
Oh, it was a ton. I mean, Michael Wilbon, who hosted Pardon the Interruption on ESPN, arguably the most successful debate show ever that has been on television. Yep. And when I first was introduced to Michael Wilbon, he was just a columnist at the Washington Post. And following his career, that was the person whose career I wanted to most model. They say imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And while I wouldn't advise necessarily imitating a writer, but I think you can learn so much from how they use their voice and how they put together, sound arguments and columns, that it really impacted me, as a writer. And of course, there are plenty of fiction writers that I loved, from James Baldwin to Maya Angelou, just so many. And so those were also equally good influences on me as well.
So you've done pretty much the biggest sports shows in the world. How did that experience influence you while you were kind of, working there? And how's that different now?
Well, much like you and your accidental gravitation toward tennis, I had a very accidental, unlikely, defiant journey into television. It was something I did not want to do. When I first started at ESPN in 2006, they hired me as a writer. And at the time, it was my manager's idea to just have 20 television appearances thrown into my contract. And I told him that was ridiculous. I was like, I don't want to be on TV. Nobody's going to put me on their television. Who cares? And I think, I know usually when we hear the phrase ignorance is bliss, it's usually in the negative. But sometimes it's actually good. And let me make the case. Because I thought so little about television, and because in my mind it was not the medium for me, I didn't take it seriously. And so when I started doing TV, I was always me. I wasn't,
good.
right? I just didn't take myself or it too seriously. And it turns out it weirdly worked. And because of my level of comfort, people were very surprised that this was something that I didn't do from the beginning. And the way it works at ESPN is that one producer sees you on one show, then another producer from another show will call you. And I was 2 years in to my career at ESPN, and half of my job was television. And 2012, 13, I dropped writing and just focused purely
TV.
on doing
Well,
television.
I can already tell by sitting here, you're real, you're authentic. So I can
try to be.
definitely tell why they wanted you on TV most of the time. In your memoir, you discuss, some of the addiction that you dealt with within your family, and how have you used that as motivation, and how has it helped you on your journey?
I wonder if this is the case for you as somebody who grew up in challenging economic circumstances. Yep. We both did. Is that it gives you perspective.
Definitely.
Right? As quote bad as that might have been, it is nothing compared to having to witness your mother go through an addiction. Yep. Right? And so it was tough, it really was. But I'm grateful for the perspective that it gave me, because later on, when I faced both personal and career challenges, I think about those days often. Definitely. And what they were like, and the pain of having to experience that and not have a normal childhood, and feel like in many ways my childhood was taken from me in some regards because I had to behave like an adult. Mm-hmm. It made me have a much tougher skin, and in some ways that's good and that's bad, because it's good in the sense that it equips you to face the world's challenges, but it's bad because the one thing I still continue to struggle with is showing vulnerability. Yeah. Even understanding how to process, my emotions in real time. And so the trauma and the scars were certainly there, but the lessons, I think, definitely equipped me for things that I would face later in life.
My mum was she's been sick my entire my career, and I've watched her have seizures right next to me when I was a young kid. And I guess having those experiences though, it's good in a way, because it's just never makes you too happy or too arrogant with what you achieve. It kind of just humbles you and brings you down to earth. So I guess I kind of just use it as motivation to keep going. And she's still here at the moment. Her health's not great, but she's still watching me do this. And when this airs, she's definitely gonna.
Well, my mother and I, we had a conversation about that where I told her I wouldn't change anything, and she would have totally taken addiction away if she could have. Whereas I look at it as seeing the things that I gained from having to come up that way. But there are lessons that I think very much fueled my success, because like you, it's it made me that much more driven.
Definitely.
And I didn't want her to go through that in vain. I know what you went through, a horrible addiction, surviving sexual abuse, all of those things. And as awful as they were, I wanted you to see how the generational trauma of that was broken.
Is there any particular time, I guess, through school or when you started writing, when the first article you printed and you were like, okay, that's me, the first time you were heard?
I think I felt that probably when I was about 17. And I was very fortunate because I got to work for the professional paper in Detroit when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And I wrote an essay about a kid at my high school. Mm-hmm. My high school was pretty much all black, and he, to my knowledge, was the only white kid that went to the school. And it was, a school of 2,000 students, right? Mm-hmm. And he was picked on and bullied and beaten up quite a bit. And I wrote this entire essay about how, while I understood the level of trauma that most black people in America had faced, we can never take on the traits of the people who have oppressed us and use those and weaponize those against other people. It's never gonna work. And the response to it was amazing. And it really taught me the power of writing in words, and writing from a point of view, and writing with authenticity and honesty, and that people respect that. Little did I know then, how much writing that way and writing about race at 17 years old would play out later in my career, because I didn't even think about it in those terms. I was like, I know this kid in my high school, he's getting bullied, and I need to write about this. And that was really the mission.
From where you were 17 years old to now, you see social media, Instagram, Twitter, all these social media platforms. And obviously you know how powerful words are, but I just feel like people don't really understand how powerful they are now when you write something. What would you tell people that don't really understand, say something negative about someone that can really affect someone's, life moving forward?
What I would say, and I feel so much empathy for athletes, because it used to be people had to send you snail mail, right? But now the curtain has been removed. Now the velvet rope is up. And so in real time, you are finding out how people feel about how you perform,
So
what you
hard.
said, and it sucks. I used to tell people to have a thick skin, but I stopped doing that because I feel like that's empowering the people to do it. And so what I would say to them is that, one, you can't let somebody else tell you who you are. You know who you are. These people do not know you at all.
At all.
And they don't know you. And by the way, the person who says the worst about you on social media will be the first person to ask you for an autograph if you saw them in person. All that keyboard energy, they ain't bringing none of that here. But what I would also tell them is that you can't respect the opinions of people who do not even have enough respect for themselves to understand how to carry themselves on that kind of platform. So as much as hard as it is not to take it to heart,
it's hard.
It's that you have to give yourself some level of distance from it and remind yourself these people don't know me.
At all.
At all. I think it was the great urban philosopher, rapper Nas, who said, haters, they're just showing twisted admiration.
It's true.
It's true.
It's true. Earlier in your career, you were, the only black female columnist at the daily newspaper in North America, further solidifying your title of Memoirs Uphill. What sort of pride and responsibility did that carry? Because I feel like in the tennis world, there's not many colored athletes. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, so.
It is a lot of responsibility, but frankly, that statistic, being the only black female sports columnist at a daily newspaper in North America, is embarrassing. It was a disheartening label to carry because I'm good, I ain't that damn good. Well, I need to be the only one who's representing, people who look like me. It unfortunately reiterated just how many strides and just how much progress still needed to be made in the profession. And representation matters so much in media because when you can tell me this as someone of color, when you look out in the press conference and no one in that room looks like you, you're like, what is going on here, right? And so if we're gonna be covering the stories, the lives, creating the narratives of athletes of color, they should be represented in the people doing that.
Definitely.
Because there's a lot of people who can't understand your perspective or who don't know what it's like for you to carry that responsibility of being an athlete of color who has a lot of expectations and responsibilities, or even how they write and talk about you is different, right?
I mean, now that you're saying this, I look back at all the press conferences that I've done. I'm trying to think about, I reckon probably underneath 5% of people that are being coloured that are actually asking me these questions. And that's why when I see these articles, I'm like, that's not how I said things, or that's not how I meant it. And it's
or
been
even just how they characterize you,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's like because frankly, sometimes their view of people of color is very limited and very narrow. Certainly you, Serena Williams, Naomi Osaka, you all have experienced this in your careers. And so as the person who was the only in the room, because there was so many locker rooms and press conferences I was in where I was either the only black person, the only woman, and certainly the only black woman. I'm gonna check one of them boxes in any of the press conferences or locker rooms that I'm in. And it's just isolating more than anything. Is that I couldn't wave a banner behind being the only one. And I don't want to be the only one. I know it should be a lot more of us. So it was one of those statistics I looked at in the negative.
And you were just disappointed.
Very disappointed.
So I guess how's the freedom now that, outside of ESPN, how's that allowed you to express yourself, more?
Well, I get to do cool things like this.
Yeah,
and I
cool.
don't have to send 50 emails explaining why I'm doing it or getting permission from anybody. I mean, this part of my career is it's a season I never expected to go through. The fact that on any given day, the only person I have to ask permission is me. And that part is very, very empowering. And, I didn't think that I would, own my own production company and all these other things. Like, I never saw that in the cards. But it's exciting because I've gotten to do so many different things, on top of being involved with various platforms, even doing some acting. I play myself very well. I can play a journalist very well. I can play myself very well. So being in these different entertainment spaces has really fed my creative spirit. So that part I just really enjoy.
So you've had the, effortless ability to step in the spotlight and, address what needs to be said. So you kind of are good trouble. You inspire so many people. So how do you plan on, continuing to embody that and making sure that you expand this space for others and people maybe don't want to say things or tread on any eggshells? Like, how are you gonna?
So that's the person I always think about whenever I make the decision to speak on something. I don't think about how it can amplify me or what it could do for me. I think about the person who is voiceless. I think about the person who can't speak to what I'm speaking to, who can't say what I can say. Whenever I talk so passionately about voting, I always say, like, I could not vote and be fine. I am voting for somebody else who is not in position to understand, not just how critical it is, but who's maybe not even in a position where they can vote or they can be heard. I'm voting for that person. And so I feel the same way when I use my voice. I'm using it for somebody who can't speak. That's why I'm very careful and strategic about what I speak about and what I say, just because I know the power of the message, and I know, and I'm hoping that someone will see me do it and decide to also pick up the baton. We need to use our megaphone to support those who are in grassroots organization, who are knocking on people's doors every day. And so that's what I also hope to do by getting into good trouble.
And as a fellow host, I'm usually in that seat getting, trying to answer questions. So I need some tips, because I know that I've got plenty of room for improvement. And sometimes, I get a bit stagnant. Because I'm just listening. Like, I'm so interesting to hear, your journey and how many people you touch with your words and stuff. So I need some tips. Like, am I doing all right?
Yeah, first of all, I would not have guessed that, this is sort of a tangent career move.
See? I told all of you I'm doing fine.
I'm not just saying that. I was like, might have a little future here. What can I say? Bottom line is, whether you're sitting on this side or this side, people appreciate real.
Yep.
1,000%. They know when somebody's bullshitting. They know this, right? And they know when you're not being authentic, and they know when you're just feeding a canned answer or you're just kind of going through the motions. And so what I often say to athletes is that you're better off really being yourself, because then people can't really take issue with it. They can try, and you also don't give the media much places to go. All right, and that's a little trick, is that it's probably a good idea to just cut off us inventing a story about you. All right, just tell us your own damn story. I'm snitching on myself, so that way y'all can't ever uncover anything about me, because I told you already. So what you gonna say now?
So with all these accolades, Journalist of the Year, all of these amazing things you've achieved, how do you maintain your edge and focus to make sure the job is getting done the best it can?
Maybe this is the type A in me. You never feel like you've made it. You never feel like you.
I don't. Big imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Same. I have big imposter syndrome. It's like I don't sit around polishing off my Emmy. No. I'm on to what am I doing in 2024?
What's next?
What's next? For me, the legacy I want to leave is not one of a bunch of awards or money or any of those things. It is a legacy of service. It's I want to know that this profession is in a better situation, a better place than when I got into it. It's a daily struggle, because some days I'm like, okay, journalism might be on the right track. The other days I'm like, journalism on fire right now. What is to happen? But I want to be a part of that process of bringing it to a better place. So that matters more to me than anything I could win or collect for personal accolades.
What would you tell the next generation of women looking to become sports journalists and cultural commentators?
I would tell them to really brace themselves for the fact that people are going to see what you aren't before they see what you are. There's still a lot of stereotypes that women in journalism, sports journalism in particular, face about, our knowledge, the way that some people have stereotyped us. They act as if, somehow all of our sports knowledge came directly from the genitalia we have, and that's not exactly how that works, because there's plenty of sports writers and sports commentators I've worked with that ain't never played nothing.
Yeah,
so it's so women often get that all the time, oh, you didn't play, you can't play, whatever. But brace themselves for the fact that those stereotypes about, why we're in the profession are going to be there, and you're gonna have to deal with that until people understand that you're good at your job. As always, focus on the craft. I feel like so many of the younger journalists now, because they see myself or, Michael Wilbon or Stephen A. Smith or Carrie Champion or all of us on TV, they think that we were born on television, right? They think that everybody gets to be on TV, everybody gets to be at ESPN, everybody gets to be at CNN or whatever, and it's like the majority of journalists are actually working class people. It's not about building a brand. You can't build a brand if you don't have a product. The product is you investing in your craft, learning how to be the best on air, learning how to be the best writer, the best interviewer, the best at developing sources, the best at building relationships with the people that you cover. Like, that's the part you should be invested in. And the other things, the social media attention, the opportunity to do cool things, win cool awards, that will come as a result of the work that you put in.
So, like for me, earlier in my career, I was authentic, but then I kind of got, negative press for it, and that kind of made me try and fit in a bit too much, and I kind of lost myself a bit. So I guess there's an authenticity to you and your work, and you've been, you stayed true to yourself. How would you advise others to kind of pursue their dreams, but being authentic as well, even if they get like shut out millions of times?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Is like, I think it takes a while for maybe some of us to understand is that there's only one you. See, I can't be you because you're already taken, right? You can't be me because I'm already taken. Like, understanding that you are enough and understanding that you bring something unique that no one else does will allow you to hold on to that authenticity and really see it as a value and not see it as something that's a detriment. And the other thing I would say too is, in whatever space you go into it, be it the world of tennis, be it journalism, know who you are before you come through the door. Don't let the place change who you are. And unfortunately, I see this happen a lot, and I'm sure you've seen it too, is that people get to certain positions and they become a different person. You got to know and be rooted in your identity before you go into your success. Otherwise, the success will change who you are.
Well, thanks for coming on. It was truly an honor.
It was an honor to get to know you in this setting, and I'm probably gonna feel bad for saying this, but not really, but I hope the Nuggets repeat. So just wanna throw that out there.
Nuggets?
I hope the Nuggets repeat.
No, you
Just
don't.
saying.
You like the Celtics. You
Do
like
not.
the Celtics. Yes, you do.
They're my mortal enemy. Do not.
Thanks for watching. For more Kuma's Good Trouble with Nick Kyrgios, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.